Hello, I'm Daniela, and in today's video, I'm going to show two techniques for stitching a hollow heart to your work. Now there are a couple of little tricks to get that heart just the way you want it with symmetrical sides, and I'll show you that in the video. But keep in mind, this is just a technique that you can use to add to your slow stitching, to add little hearts here and there. And here's my process. So I have an old quilt here, and this will be my backing to start my piece. And then I have just two pieces of fabric that I'm going to use. I'm going to cut out my hearts with this piece of fabric here. And it's just a piece of muslin here. So I'm going to take it, and to make the hearts, I want them to be identical, and that's why I have two pieces of fabric. I'm just going to fold them in half. So right on this seam is where I'm going to get my hearts. And I'm going to create them this way so that they'll match, they'll be symmetrical. So I'm going to take and make a small heart first. And I just go around, slowly moving that fabric. And I make the cuts, and I have little fabric hearts that I can use for another project. While I still have my fabric together, still folded, I'll just go around and cut a thin line, trying to keep it somewhat parallel to that first shape that I cut out. So now what's remaining from this fabric are just pieces with the fabric cut out, and I'll use this in another project perhaps. But for today, I want these two hearts, these little silhouettes, really, outlines of hearts. They're approximately the same size and shape. So I can put them right on my fabric, and then I'll just show the two techniques that I use to stitch them down. So roughly this is where I want them. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect. So for the first one, I'm just going to do a couching stitch to hold it down. I'll set this aside for now, and I'll take a pin and just stick it in to hold my heart in place, just roughly in place. Then I'll take whatever color thread that I want to use. I have some pink thread here, and I'm going to start right at this point in the center. So I'm going to come up on one side of my heart, right at that central point here, the little Cupid's bow of the heart, pull my thread taut, and come down right opposite it at the very point, at the very bottom point. And then I'm just going to go up a little ways, and the spacing that you choose is up to you. It can be very tightly spaced or openly spaced. And I want my next stitch to have a slight angle. And I'll continue around. I'll move this pin, and again I'm just trying to space it accordingly. And I'm going to have a slight angle on this stitch. And then I'll do the same thing. You can either always start at the same location, either the top or the bottom, or you can alternate. And I like to alternate depending on where my stitches are. So I'll come in over here, bring my stitch down, then I'll slowly turn my piece. And I'll just continue all the way around this heart. Again, I'm not stitching through that pink heart, I'm stitching around it to hold it in place. If you want, you can use some fusible interfacing, and you use that with a hot iron. You attach that to the back of your fabric before you make your heart cuts. Then after you cut your hearts, you can use that iron to hold it down, iron it into place, and then you could stitch around it just like an applique. Sometimes I do that, but I don't mind the movement of the fabric. I actually like the feel of that. I like to stitch both the top and the bottom piece of my heart just with straight stitches at that point. But again, that's totally personal. If you want to avoid stitching there, you can certainly do that. So there I have all the stitches around the heart. If I want to, I can go around and add stitches in between the stitches that exist. But I like the way that looks and the way it looks almost flush with this fabric. I'll knot the back, and then I'm ready to create my second heart. So I'll put my heart down. Actually, I think I'll flip it around this way because of that fold. Once I have it in place where I'm happy with it, I'll take a pin it down. And I'll pin it on the side here as well. Now for this technique, again, you choose a needle with whatever color thread you want. And now I'm just going to do a stitch right down the center all the way around this heart. I'm going to start at the bottom here. Just eyeball the center. I could always take a marker and mark the center. And then I decide what stitch I want to use. I'm going to come in here and use the stem stitch where I make a stitch. I come up in the path of the stitch before I pull it snug, and then I pull it snug. I like this stitch because it looks like it's twirled when I'm finished with it. It also is a nice stitch to make curves. So I try and keep all my stitches approximately the same size. This is about 1/3 of an inch long. And I'll make them a little smaller on the curve. That way I get a nice smooth turn on that curve. And I'll continue this all the way around this heart. So there I have the second heart all finished, just with a stitch down the center. This leaves the fabric loose around here, and it's kind of a very rustic and fun effect. Now, I ran out of thread somewhere along here, so I had to knot my fabric and start a new piece of thread. And so that's what it looks like on the back. But it's very hard to see in the front of the work. So those are two ways that I add hollow hearts to my slow stitching pieces. Depending on the colors you choose for both the fabric and the stitches, you can get a totally different effect. I hope you found today's video helpful, and if you did, give it a thumbs up and be sure to subscribe. Thanks for joining me.